It's a hot topic in higher education across the state and region, a freeze that could affect student finances for the better. Students at the state's largest post-secondary institution might have some relief from rising tuition costs. On Thursday, Ivy Tech Community College announced plans to freeze tuition for those students who remain enrolled continuously from term to term through the fall 2015 semester. Tuition also won't go up for those students who enroll in 30 or more credit hours combined for the fall 2015 and spring 2016 terms. The move comes shortly after Indiana University President Michael McRobbie called for a 2-year tuition freeze for in-state students on the university's Bloomington campus. IU officials will also begin to look at creating a flat rate for all tuition across all regional campuses. Indiana Commissioner for Higher Education Teresa Luber says both institutions are aligned with the state's priority to make college more affordable. Ivy Tech officials say the move will likely benefit more than 65% of Ivy Tech students.
It has a lot of benefits for our students. Most students will find this a welcome news that it helps them to plan how they will attend Ivy Tech and understand predictably what it's going to cost them so they can budget better.
Coley says this is the first time he recalls a tuition freeze for Ivy Tech, and he hopes it will encourage more students to complete their coursework quicker. Another academic institution in the region is also looking at the bottom line this month. Officials at Purdue University Calumet will broadcast a public hearing on proposed Purdue fees. The May 27th meeting is a special gathering of the Purdue Board of Trustees Executive Committee. The committee is expected to talk about tuition and fees for students attending any Purdue campus through 2017. A viewing will take place at the Student Union and Library. Members of the public wishing to comment can contact the university at 765-494-9710. An elected official in Gary is organizing a community forum of his own in response to a series of shootings in the Steel City. Councilman Ron Brewer says he wants to gather neighbors and city leaders at a public forum June 4th at Gary City Hall. He says Lake County Sheriff John Bunsich, along with the Gary Police Chief, will be there to talk about curbing violent crime. Gary Police Department spokesman Tom DeCanter says 2 gun-related deaths last weekend put the city's homicide rate at 20 so far this year. He says residents can make all the difference.
I understand that they're scared, but it's our job to make sure that they're not scared. I mean, let us do our job so we can make it safer, and you don't have to be scared. If anybody's seen anything or heard anything, please call us and give us the information. I mean, you could remain anonymous, just anything to help us go forward with this.
Brewer is also organizing a walkathon set for June 6th to spread his message of anti-violence. Well, police in Lake Station are seeking more information in the violent death of a young child. 19-year-old Antonio Harris of Lake Station is charged with murder, battery, and neglect of a child in the death of his girlfriend's 2-year-old daughter. Harris is accused of beating his girlfriend's daughter, Nieli Lopez, to death. Harris told police he was babysitting his girlfriend's daughter when he noticed the child was unresponsive. He says he tried to perform CPR. Instead of going to a nearby ambulance station, Harris and his aunt drove around until they spotted a Gary fire truck. The child was taken to Methodist Hospital Northlake in Gary, where she was pronounced dead. According to the authorities, the toddler suffered blunt force injuries, including a rib fracture and severe damage to her liver. Because of these injuries, the coroner ruled her death a homicide. Harris denies killing the child. Well, whether you plan to spend some much-needed time with family and friends to celebrate Memorial Weekend outdoors, safety officials want residents to take caution if they're taking to the water. The U.S. Coast Guard says now is the season to remember boating safety. According to the Coast Guard data, in 2014, 610 people died on the water, and 84% of those people drowned. And those people were not wearing life jackets. Water safety experts say you should also know that some rules of the road also relate to water. The Coast Guard advises you should not mix boating and alcohol because it decreases your response time and could be fatal in an accident. The Coast Guard's motto is, if you have a life jacket, wear it.
Whoever to get ejected from a boat, even a expert swimmer, cannot stay afloat forever. A life jacket will increase your chances of survival dramatically. The Coast Guard just wants to stress that as much as possible.
There are several courses that you can take to learn about the rules of piloting a boat safely. For more information, you can go to uscgboating.org. Well, at least one man is answering safety officials charged to stand up to violence in the region, and he's doing so as a former gang member. That story plus Steve Walsh coming up on Lakeshore Report.
Lakeshore Report wants to hear from you. Send your thoughts, concerns, questions, and story ideas to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. You can also reach us on Facebook and Twitter at Lakeshore Report. Make sure to tweet us using the hashtag NWIPride, and you may see your comments on air. Lakeshore Report, providing you region-focused content.
Across the country, police departments facing pressure to have more accountability for their officers are turning to police body cameras. One of the latest departments to use them is Hammond. As Steve Lattimore reports, the Hammond Police Department's recent history has some residents happy the new program will have someone else watching the police.
The video you're about to see is of a Hammond police stop involving a family that is now accusing the police of using excessive force. It put Hammond in the national spotlight, and for all the wrong reasons.
The car. You just pulled a gun out on us. We didn't have a gun in front of my kids.
In September of last year, Hammond police officers pulled over Lisa Mahone and her friend Jamal Jones. Her two children were also in the car. One of them videotaped the entire encounter.
Had her two young children in the car and had Jamal Jones, her friend, in the passenger seat, and had forgot to put her seatbelt on. Police officers stopped her for a seatbelt violation, then requested Jamal's identification, and he told them that he did not have identification, and attempted to give them a ticket with his information on it. They refused, ordered him out of the car, which they did not have a right to do. He had tried to comply with their request for identification, shattered the glass, tasered him in front of these two small children.
The couple has filed a federal lawsuit claiming the police used excessive force. That was then.
Hi, we see your license, registration, and insurance, please.
And this is now. When Hammond police make a traffic stop now, it's all caught on tape by the officer's body cam.
What you have is the general order states that anytime you're interacting with the public in an official capacity, you have to activate your camera. So therefore, it takes any discretion from the officer away from the officer as to when and where to activate the camera. So it's in black and white, and there's accountability on that side, that if there's an interaction that's not recorded, you have to figure out why.
There are 156 body cameras, and everyone who is on patrol has their own individual camera. They are only turned off if the officer is on a meal break, a personal call, or in the bathroom.
When an officer uploads his or her own video footage, that is all they can view, is his or her own video footage. They can't edit it, they can't delete it, they can't alter it in any way. They can view it, and that's it.
The attorney for Jones and Mahone says the cameras are a good first step.
I think it's good that officers are, police departments are now seeing that their officers need to be accountable. It does not fix the situation, and it certainly is not, they're not taking responsibility for what happened in this case, and they need to take responsibility for that. The fact that there are body cams, and they're implementing this program allows for some accountability of officers and police departments as long as they preserve the body cams. But body cams don't show everything. It doesn't show the officer's conduct. It shows if they have a body cam, it shows what they're looking at, not what the officer is actually doing. Body cams are not foolproof. And citizens like Joseph, like young kids and teenagers, the fact that they're getting smarter and people are videotaping this is holding police officers and police department accountable for what's happening on the streets where people are being terrorized by the police.
Police officials say that the body cams are not as a direct result of this incident. Meanwhile, those two officers are back on the street. In Hammond, Stephen Lattimore, Lakeshore Report.
There's a man in the region who's making it his mission to reach young people before they ever encounter law enforcement. Patrick Sabatis says he's the right person to get teens off the street because that's where his story of change began.
So you think in your heart, so are you. It's like, okay, if you constantly think in turmoil in your heart, that's what's going to happen.
Growing up in the region, Patrick Sabatis says he lived in a middle-class household ruled by an abusive father. He found comfort in a group outside his home. He called them family at the time, but they're also known as the Latin King Gang.
They're doing things like, shooting and burning houses down and putting fear in communities where people don't want to allow their children to play out in the front yard.
We're going to put him to the test, as they say.
Being a gang member is now in his past. He's traded time in the streets for time with teens with his nonprofit, Sabatis Educational Institution, Reclaim Our Kids.
God gave you 2 ears for a reason.
Why does it Reclaim Our Kids? Because they're sucked into that particular lifestyle. So you're going out in there and you're reclaiming their mind, their emotions, and their aspirations. We help them redream.
His mission? To try to reach youth dealing with bullying, gang pressure, or abuse. His means? His feet? His speech? And the courage to go to corners he once hung out on.
Eventually, when they're involved in that stuff, they're going to come to that crossroad or that brick wall and realize this isn't what I thought it was, or kind of got drawn into it a little bit deeper than I wanted to be at. And if they don't realize that, that's why we come and do group sessions and go speak at schools, so they can hear it from a side of people who've actually lived that lifestyle and gone through that heartache.
Trying to prevent teens from being initiated into a gang is dangerous work for him because he's standing up against organized crime. He says adults can better reach young people by avoiding labels like gangbanger or thug.
If somebody's constantly giving you labels that you won't amount to nothing, you're an LD and this and that, you begin to believe it. They distance themselves now, so what would have been more easier to reach out to them if you just expressed love because you decided to speak negativity to that child, they ran closer into the gang.
It's a lesson that 19-year-old Roberto Miranda got by going through a violent 3 years in a gang.
I got jumped, shot at, just beat up, and never got any help. You just gotta realize that they need you more than you need them.
Now the student is passing on the lesson.
I help talk to other kids. Basically, I look for the ones that did the same thing I did, whether it be in the same gang or not. Try to make it up. Try to get back to the community.
We're not going nowhere. I'm not stopping.
Sabatis says he's always looking for opportunities to speak to young people and parents as well. You can find more information about Reclaim Our Kids on our website, lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Over the last year, Indiana was at the center of a nationwide fight for same-sex couples to marry, with one Northwest Indiana couple leading the debate. Now, almost a year since Indiana's marriage ban was struck down, Steve Walsh checks in with leaders from the LGBT community about where marriage equality stands.
It's been close to a year since the U.S. Supreme Court originally overturned the ban on same-sex marriage in Indiana. A lot has changed, but advocates say that more needs to be done for the LGBT community in Northwest Indiana. To talk about it, we have Susie Kriske, who is the owner of Crown Counseling, and Natalie Lukic, who runs the nonprofit LGBT support group out of Crown Counseling called the Pride Initiative. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So last year, was it a seismic shift for the gay community in Northwest Indiana? Have we really seen things change here?
It's a little hard for me to say because the population that I work with typically is more geared towards college-age young kids. They're bringing parents in, and we do have a few older people that attend the group, but it is mostly the younger population. So with that, when we had the interview the other day with the newspaper, they were talking about how marriage equality really hadn't affected them that much. It was great, and it was a step forward, but they're more concerned about overall laws that basically protect their rights that we don't really have here in Indiana. And that was the big push for them. And those are the things that are more important for them as, the younger generation.
Call it support group, your counseling service. I mean, is it a matter of people needing counseling? Yeah.
The support group, I guess, isn't really... It's a support group. It's not a therapeutic group. So basically, it's there to provide...
Because there's somewhat of a stigma, the notion that you're medicalizing something that is just normal behavior.
Right.
The group is part education and support. So sometimes if a parent brings in a child, maybe they have questions or concerns, they can come to the group to ask, to be around people, to ask the questions, be around the facilitators to get the information they need.
And it's a safe environment for them to do that. So that's what we're providing. We're not pathologizing anybody that's LGBTQ. That's exactly
Right.
the opposite of what we're trying to do.
So marriage equality, I guess unless you're getting married, this is mostly symbolic?
I don't know. I mean, personally, I love it because my brother got married to his partner last year.
All right.
So for me, it's huge. I love it. I think it's one
On a
thing.
personal level,
Yeah,
it changed the
Yes,
family.
yes.
All right.
I think it's just for our kids, I think, in the group, because of the recent law that was passed, and people think that that law was targeted towards the LGBTQ community. I'm not here to debate that politically about what that law actually meant for people. But I definitely think that it gave the idea to the younger generation that they aren't welcome as much in Indiana. And so I sort of see the Marriage Equality Act as a way to say at least we have this going for us. At least we have something that says that there's a footstep, a doorway for us to get more rights and equality in Indiana.
And you mentioned RFRA. I mean, did you see that reflected, that statewide debate, which became a national debate? Did you see that reflected down at the grassroots level here in the support groups?
Definitely. Everybody had something to say about it. I can't imagine, walking in with somebody from group and being denied service. This is what they're this is what the thinking is, that they could be denied service somewhere. Even we had to put we have to put an equality sign on our front door so people know that they can come in and we can serve them, and we will serve them, just like anybody else,
That's right.
But it just seems, I think to the group especially, it seems crazy to even have to do that, that it has to be a thing,
Do we see, do people in your support group, do they see overt discrimination in Indiana? And is that at all changing?
What do you think, Susie? I think it's getting better.
It's getting better,
Yeah.
but just like with our group, the LGBTQ group, it's the only one in Lake County. So
And that's
it's just-
surprising. This is a very large county
Yes.
here, over 500,000 people right out at the doorstep of Chicago.
Yeah. And people say that too. Oh, well, Chicago, there's tons of resources in Chicago. Well, for the people that live around us, and especially when we get down here towards Crown Point or some of the other communities around here, that's a really long way to go. And it's a whole different world in some sense, from here to Chicago for some people. So
All right, well, thanks. Thanks to both of you.
thank you. Thanks.
Twice a month, Lakeshore Report teams up with the Society of Innovators of Northwest Indiana to showcase some of the most forward-thinking people and ideas the region has to offer. This week, we're keeping our eyes to the skies. Innovator Kenneth Brock tells us how he's predicting the arrival of birds to the region and how you can see some for yourself.
Migration refers to the movement of birds or animals from one location to another location. The innovation that I'm involved with is a determination using bird data and information accumulated by the birder activity to determine the dates you can expect certain migrants to arrive and depart in our area. It basically, if you think about the arrival of birds and the number of birds that occur on each day as like a little board, and then you end up with a stack of boards that in the spring get taller and taller each day and then go down, down, down again. So you end up with a curve that looks a little bit like the standard curve that statisticians use a lot. And I basically break that down. I take the first 10% is the point, the date of that first 10% of those birds as the arrival date, and then the midpoint as the peak of the flight, and the 90% line as the departure date. There are some advantages that would be available to anybody. If you like to go outdoors, it gives you a reason to go outdoors. In addition to that, to enjoy it, I mean, if you look at the data that I accumulated, and you say, oh, May 10th, that's the day that the prairie warbler arrives. So let's go see if we can find a prairie warbler. It becomes a challenge. There may be on the order of 320 or so species of birds that have been seen along the Indiana lakefront. a lot of birds are seen on the lake itself. They're attracted to the large body of water. In fact, probably Lake Michigan is the most important single factor on birds in our area. But other birds prefer not to fly over the lake. So when they're migrating, they say, oops, when they encounter the lake, and they turn and follow along the shore or land locally along the shore. And as a result, there's sort of a concentration of birds right along the edge of the lake. Well, there is an ecological element to it. You know, the birds are very environmentally sensitive. So if suddenly a population begins to decline, it means something's gone wrong. And the way you detect it initially is by birders not finding the number of birds they expect to find all the time. Because of Lake Michigan's presence, Northwest Indiana is one of the finest birding places in the Midwest and maybe even in the interior of the U.S. It's really special, and people drive from miles and miles. I mean, we regularly get people from Chicago and Indianapolis and Fort Wayne and Lafayette that drive up here, and people from outside of the state, people from Michigan and even further away come up to enjoy the beautiful birds that we have during migration in the Indiana lakefront.
And for more information about any of our stories, don't forget you can always find us online at www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org, and you can tweet us at Lakeshore Report. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time on Lakeshore Report.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Meg Roman, Executive Director of the Miller Beach Arts and Creative District. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
So the district is about, I think, what, 4 years old
Almost
now?
4 years old, yes.
And you have been with the district for a year.
Quite less than a year,
Just
but
a
almost.
little less.
Yeah.
Yes. And as always, you have events going on up and down Lake Street in the Marshall J. Gardner Center for the Arts.
We do, indeed.
And you have something called Lake Effect, spelled with a K.
Yes.
Why is it spelled with a K?
It's funky.
Oh, it's funky. Well, thank you for explaining that. Okay. So what is Lake Effect, though?
Lake Effect started initially in 2013, and we're bringing it back this year because it was such a success. Great collaboration with the KISA crew out of Hammond and East Chicago. KISA stands for Crazy Indiana Style Artists.
Yes.
And we became known for our pop-ups because that's how we started before we were given the Marshall J. Gardner Center for the Arts. And it's something that people really like and look forward to. So we're closing the streets from a couple blocks of Lake Street, and it's going to be a 3-week event. There will be 3 weeks in the Gardner Center, which will be fine art, inspired by graffiti artists, or graffiti artists who actually do fine art as well. And then we will have some educational pieces to that, so there'll be a panel discussion, and there will be some graffiti artists who are talking about why they do what they do and where they get their passion from. And we will also then have the June 13th event on the street where we have food vendors, arts and crafts, children dancing, spoken word, live bands, a beer tent from 18th Street Brewery, and just a whole lot of fun.
Oh, great. I first got to know those guys, the KISA artists, 20 years ago when they really were quite young. Now they're like old men. They're in their 30s or something.
Yes.
And
some are in their 40s.
Okay, and they have families, they have jobs, they have real jobs and all that kind of thing. And so 2 years ago they did a number of graffiti murals on walls around the Lake Street business area. And are they going to be doing some more of that?
They are indeed. So all of the businesses who signed up in 2013 have signed up again to have their walls repainted.
Oh, good.
And we have some new businesses who heard about it and saw it and wanted to be a part of it as well. So
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you for being here to tell us about it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.